The Legend of Zelda has some of the best video game music ever, so I'm going to go through every mainline game and pick a best and worst in my own personal opinion. Starting with the original Legend of Zelda, it has a small soundtrack, but what's there is iconic. The overall theme is a classic, but I had to go with the main theme. It's been remixed more times than a Smash player has blamed RNG, and that's for good reason. It just sounds great and adventurous, which is why the melody hasn't needed to change much as the series has progressed. The ending theme also deserves a mention because it sounds like it wandered in from a Mario game, but Mario music is pretty good too, so no complaints there. Now for the worst here, I'm going with the Game Over theme. It's the loop that is just long enough to not be a jingle, but it is grating. Like, it actively hurts my ears to listen to, but I guess it motivates me to not get a game over, so there is that. Before I continue, I want to say that stuff like ambient dungeon noise will not count. So think about like Dodongo's Cavern, Jabu Jabu's Belly, stuff that basically is just drums and a cave echo. If I included those, these picks would be very easy, and that would make for a very boring video. I'm also trying to avoid anything that's like a super short jingle, even though that is kind of subjective. And speaking of subjective, this is my own personal opinion, so drop your picks in the comments, and if you do agree with any of my picks, you gotta subscribe, but if you don't agree with a single pick, feel free to dislike. Look, I'm not gonna pretend I love Zelda 2, and this game has a lot of problems. Like, real problems. But the soundtrack does not deserve to go down with the ship, because it is actually phenomenal and it does not get enough credit. The Palace theme is an outright banger, and you 100% know that if you've played this, but I'm gonna go with Town Team. I know people default to the Palace theme, and I really do get it, but the Town theme has this warmth to it that I really just like. And given how brutally Zelda 2 treats you, walking into a village and hearing that melody feels like someone finally being nice to you after you got out of a comment section where you had a slightly different opinion from other commenters. The worst here for me is the ending theme. And here's why it bothers me so much specifically. You just survived Zelda 2, the game that will humble you repeatedly and without remorse, so you'd think the ending music would feel something like relief or triumph. What you get is a short fanfare that loops pretty fast and sorta just ends. The game punishes you the whole way through, and then the music can't even be bothered to celebrate when it's finally over. Kind of a fitting summary of the whole experience, honestly. A Link to the Past might have the best 16-bit soundtrack ever made. Might. I didn't say it does. Chrono Trigger exists, I know, Super Mario World, a lot of great SNES soundtracks. But Hyrule Castle, The Dark World, Zelda's Rescue, Kakariko Village, almost everything here is a classic. Finding a worst is basically just finding the one track that didn't quite reach that level, because there isn't one bad track here. But before we get to that, we gotta talk about my favorite, and I'm going with Kakariko Village. I thought about maybe choosing Mita and the Maidens here, but I decided not to. Just the fact that it became the melody for Zelda's Lullaby makes it worth bringing up, but I decided to go with Kakariko Village because it is one of my all-time favorite Zelda tracks, and rather than just pick it for like half the games here, I'm just going with the original version. I can't fully explain it, like some music you appreciate as sounding good, and others just bring you back to a simpler time, which for me was when I first played this in 2037. So for the worst, a lot of people probably won't even remember this track. If you've ever stepped into a fortune teller shop in A Link to the Past, you've heard it, and you probably immediately wanted to leave. The fortune teller theme sounds like a circus, but not the good kind. It sounds like the circus that happens when you walk in the room. There's this high-pitched carnival melody that just sounds off, the loop is short enough to get grating pretty fast, and just sticks out like a sore thumb against everything else in the soundtrack. I get what they were going for, but it just sounds out of place and annoying. The original Game Boy version of Link's Awakening is one of the more limited soundtracks in terms of sound, obviously being on the Game Boy. The Switch remake, to its credit, did completely imagine it, and I do like that a lot better, but the original still has a lot of great tracks. Ballad of the Windfish, Telltale Heights, Maiden Village. There's plenty of going on here, but my favorite here out of those three is gonna be Maiden Village. There's something joyous about it, but also the slightly unsettling quality underneath, and that combo is kind of perfect for a game where you eventually find out a certain plot twist. You can't quite put your finger on what's off about it, but it kind of just sticks with you as you listen to it. Also, like I mentioned, I really love Ballad of the Windfish too, but for me I had to go with Maiden Village. And for the worst, I'm going with Key Cavern. It's not horrific, but it's the level 3 dungeon theme, and it's just a slow bass line going over the same few notes with some high-pitched dings on top, and that's pretty much all it does. There's also no actual melody. The loop is short enough that you've heard everything it has within 30 seconds or so, and after a few minutes in that dungeon, it just kind of disappears off into the background. Other dungeons in this game have more going on, and I feel like Key Cavern just drags the whole time, but it's not at the point where I would say it's just ambient like some other tracks. My favorite Zelda game, and I actually didn't play this as a kid, I played it in 2014 on my 3DS, so when I say the soundtrack is legendary, I'm not even saying it with a ton of nostalgia either. The game itself just has legendary music, which is to be expected from a game with an instrument in the title. Where do you even start with the best tier? Zelda's Lullaby, Windmill Hut, Great Fairy Fountain, Kakariko Village, the title theme. All of them could be here. After a lot of back and forth though, I'm picking Gerudo Valley. It doesn't sound like anything else in the game, or really anything else Nintendo was making at the time. And if you know a guitarist who has ever touched a Zelda game once in their life, they've played this before. It is a popular pick, and I know someone's going to comment that that's the basic choice, but it's the popular pick for a reason. Now for the worst here, it's going to be a controversial one. I'm going with Song of Storms. It's a classic for many people, but I really just don't get it, is what I would say if I didn't know ball. I just got you to comment in all caps about how it's crazy to choose Song of Storms here. Put the big Goron swords down. You know in all my music videos like this I have to do a fake out pick like this. I'm actually going with the battle theme here. It's a music whenever you fight enemies in Hyrule Field. It's just a short, frantic loop that never really develops into anything, and you hear it constantly. And I want to be clear that the actual worst track in the game is probably Dodongo's Cavern. But like I mentioned, it's literally just cave drums, and calling it a full track here just felt like a cop-out. Battle theme at least tries. Majora's Mask is the most unsettling thing Nintendo has ever made, and the music is relentless about making you feel like something is wrong, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. For the best, it came down to 2 tunes that couldn't be more different. Clockdown First Day is upbeat and slightly frantic. And it nails the feeling of arriving somewhere that looks normal while you slowly realize it isn't. Everyone in that town is either panicking or pretending not to, and the music sort of has that tension without ever dropping that cheerful surface. I don't know how else to describe it, but it just nails that specific kind of dread. And then there's Song of Healing. It's just a slow, somber piano track that you play for dying Zora. When a piano track really lands, I usually like it a lot. I love the piano, and this one just gets me every time. So I gotta go with Song of Healing. Shout out to Astral Observatory 2. Super underrated. For the worst tier. Okay, so the obvious candidate is Kamaro's song, but I can't call it the worst because it's just so hilariously bizarre in this adventure that it wraps back around to being kind of good. So I'm gonna be going with Keaton's Quiz. The track during the Fox Trivia game where you're wearing the Keaton mask, it's high-pitched, bouncy, fully experienced in about 10 seconds. It's meant to be playful, and sure it is, but there's just nothing there, and it plays for a little too long. It's just forgettable in a soundtrack where everything else is just unforgettable. The Oracle games are slept on constantly, and their music goes with them. Seasons had some fun stuff even with the GBC limitations. Goron Village is pleasant. The Subrosia track's a personality. My favorite is Din's Dance. It's just so joyous and fun, and I don't know, I just really like it. My least favorite here is A Crazy Dance. And it sounds exactly like you'd expect a song called Crazy Dance to sound. Hyperactive chiptune that loops every few seconds and just goes into your brain without actually sounding that good. I'll give it credit that it fits its tone, but it doesn't make it good to listen to. Now onto the other Oracles game. My favorite here, it has this upbeat, slightly mysterious quality that really reminds me of Link's Awakening, and that comprised GBC soundtrack gives it a texture I just really love. And now for the worst, I know a lot of people would say Fairy's Woods, but I'm actually going to go in a different direction here. So is it annoying? Yes. Is it memorable? Also yes, and kind of for bad reasons. But there is a melody there, and I cannot say the same for Crown Dungeon. It doesn't even give you anything. It's just this slow brooding track that just tries to sound ominous and it never quite gets there. And then after a few minutes, it just kind of fades into white noise. This is another one that's a little bit subjective if you don't want to consider it a full track. And if you don't want to consider that one to be a full track, then my pick would be Fairy's Woods. Because that's the runner-up anyway. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords came packed with the GBA port of A Link to the Past, which meant most people, including me, spent way more time in A Link to the Past than actually playing 4 Swords. The soundtrack heavily leans on A Link to the Past music anyway, so the original tracks are doing their best without much company. The best here for me is the boss battle theme. It's a pretty energetic piece of music, it's chaotic, it's fast. My least favorite here is Chambers of Insight. And honestly, this one almost didn't make it because it's so forgettable I kept skipping past it in my head. It's the tutorial era music, it's quiet, it's mild, it's designed so you don't get distracted while reading hint tablets. It completely succeeds at not being distracting, but you will probably not remember it exists. How many of you just paused this video now to go and look it up to hear the full version because you just didn't remember it? Wind Waker was actually my favorite Zelda game for a long time, and still one of the games I feel most emotionally attached to. It has a very distinct visual style, and also a very distinct musical style. Of course it has the warm, cel-shaded graphics, and the soundtrack has that same energy. It's just very warm, it's bright, it's full of personality, and it doesn't always feel as grand or orchestral, but it has a very different vibe that I really like. So for my favorite here, I tried to find a different pick for best because Dragon Roost Island is the obvious answer. And I was seeing if there was something I was missing to make a more interesting pick. I couldn't though. Dragon Roost is the obvious answer because it really is just that good. Outset Island is also fantastic and would be the best track in a lot of other games. But I just like Dragon Roost better. For the worst, I just want to say that there's not actually a single bad track here. Like, this is one of the highest quality OSTs in the series, but we gotta pick one, and it is Forsaken Fortress. Now, I don't actually hate this, because it actually works well for putting you on edge in a stealth section, which is not the best part of the game, but we're not talking about the part of the game, we're talking about the music. It just has this bass sound, it's short and repetitive, and compared to how alive so many other tracks here sound, this one you probably only remember for being one of the worst parts of the game. I also avoided picking Dragon Roost Cavern, which is very different from Dragon Roost Island, because that basically is drum and cave noise. Forsaken Fortress at least qualifies with this criteria. It's just not a very exciting one. 4 Swords Adventures gets overlooked constantly, and the soundtrack gets overlooked with it. Lots of Zelda remixes in here and some solid originals. Village of the Blue Maiden is a good example of the new stuff working. But for my favorite here, it is a repeat from an older game, but it's Fairy Fountain. The originals don't have that true standout for me, and I just really love how the Fairy Fountain theme sounds in this game. Now on the opposite end, my least favorite is Zelda Mini Boss. When you would think the job of the song is to make the fight feel urgent, you would be right in assuming that's what it should do, but it does not do that. It's just the short tune that just cycles every few seconds without doing anything, and if you put that next to the full boss theme in the game, the difference is pretty stark. It just pretty much makes some noise and that's it. It's not something very interesting to listen to. Minish Cap is one of the most underrated games in the series, and I will always hold that opinion until we get some sort of remake. The Game Boy Advance audio really stands out here, and some games it's hit or miss, but I do like it here. And it is a really high quality soundtrack, and remember, Nintendo didn't even make this game. My favorite here is Minish Village. It sounds a lot fuller than a lot of other Game Boy Advance tracks. It has a beautiful melody, and just every time I go back to it, I'm just a little surprised by how much I like it. It's honestly one of my favorites in the whole series. The worst here for me is the cave theme. This isn't bad, it's just because like so many other tracks here, it does classify as a full track rather than just ambient noise, but there's no real melody here, there's nothing to follow, and just every other track in this game has something. Cave theme just doesn't. And in a soundtrack this good, anything that's even slightly forgettable is going to be considered for the worst here. And speaking of strong soundtracks, Twilight Princess is up there for me. Besides having some of the best dungeons like Arbiter's Ground, Snow Peak Ruins, Temple of Time, City in the Sky, the soundtrack is amazing here and kind of goes for that Majora's Mask vibe in a way, but it's still very different. It has a dark tone, it's kind of orchestral, it kind of has weird sound that I can't really explain. One of the themes I considered was the Hyrule Field theme. So this is a fan favorite for a reason. It's a fantastic piece, but it's not my favorite here. That goes to Midna's Lament. It kind of does the same thing for me that the Song of Healing does. It's just a somber piano piece in the minor key with just enough brightness that it just stops feeling sad and you feel like there's some hope there. Just a beautiful piece of music. I know some people are probably going to comment that it's a crime I didn't choose another track here, and that's just because there's so many great pieces of music here that I could see like 15 other ones here being someone's favorite. So now when it comes to the worst, I think the popular pick is probably Malomar. It's just that demented carnival jingle with like the weird vocals, and Link just stands there now reacting to it. I understand why people pick this. It is unhinged, but I'm not picking Malamar. I kind of like it in a way. Like, it's kind of just so off that it's actually kind of funny to listen to. I've also used this in other videos in the past, so I will not be going with this one. My least favorite here is actually Twilight Battle. It's the music during the Shadow Beast encounters, where we're fighting those creatures from the portal in the twilight-covered areas. It just has these same droning, distorted sounds, just repetitive percussion, barely any melody. You hear it every time these portals open, which is a lot, and it just is never interesting. The rest of the soundtrack is just so rich that when one just isn't very good here, it really sticks out. I appreciate Phantom Hourglass more than I enjoy it. As a Wind Waker sequel, it had a tough task, and the Temple of the Ocean King, the central dungeon you revisit repeatedly under a time limit, is one of the most frustrating decisions in the series. But for the actual music itself, a lot of Wind Waker's music comes back here compressed for the DS sound chip, but the originals here are worth talking about. My favorite here is the obvious one, it's Linebeck's theme. Again, I've said this like 3 times throughout the video, but it is the popular pick for a reason. It has a harpsichord sound, little brass, woodwinds. It just sounds exactly like a guy who's definitely not as helpful as he thinks, but is somehow still charming enough that you keep him around. Just a great character theme. For the worst, sailing in Phantom Hourglass takes you into all kinds of areas, and some of those areas are marked dangerous. Uncharted territory is that tension cue that kicks in when you're in those waters. It just keeps playing until you leave, and the first time it sounds fine, but when you keep hearing it over and over again, and it's not particularly complex either, by like the 3rd time you just get bored of it, it just gets very tedious and doesn't sound particularly good at all. People sleep on the soundtrack here, and I don't get it. Very similar energy to Phantom Hourglass, but just better overall, I think. The opening theme is my favorite. The winds and the percussion, just that melody. There's moments in it that remind me of Twilight Princess, which I was not expecting from a DS Zelda game. It feels bigger than the hardware it's on. Full Steam Ahead also deserves a mention too. It really goes for the train thing, and I love it for that. Lost at Sea Station is the worst here. And the reason it's the worst is kind of a funny story. This is an optional area that calls back to Phantom Hourglass's Temple of the Ocean King, and because it's a callback, the music is basically the same composition as that temple's theme, and that already was not beloved. I know that was not my least favorite in Phantom Hourglass, but I could have mentioned that as a dishonorable mention. So you've got a near copy of a track people weren't crazy about in the first place, just dropped into the side area, most players not even spend much time in. It's just droning, repetitive, atmosphere heavy, and melody light, and it ends up becoming background noise almost immediately, and you probably don't even remember this. Skyward Sword is my least favorite 3D Zelda. The linearity in the controls really get to me, and then Fi, whatever you want to call her, just shows up every 5 minutes to tell you something you already know. With that being said, I still really like this game, but it's competing against some of my favorite games of all time, and I don't think there's any 3D Zelda game that's even close to bad. But the soundtrack actually might be my favorite in the entire series. It was the first Zelda with a full live orchestra, and you feel it everywhere. Skyloft, Fi's theme, Linearu Sans Sea. So like I said, this is not my favorite Zelda game, especially not my favorite 3D Zelda game, but the music on the other hand is amazing here. And the best here for me is Ballad of the Goddess. It's actually Zelda's Lullaby reversed and just built into this sweeping orchestral piece. Whoever came up with that deserves recognition and probably a raise, but also it's been like 15 years, so hopefully they're doing well. And fun fact, as someone who is not a very good piano player, this is one of my favorite tracks to try and play. For the worst, this is a tough one because the soundtrack is just so strong here, but there actually is one that I forgot about that is an easy pick for me. Din's Power harp version is one of the short melodies you play on the Goddess harp during the Song of the Hero quest, and it is bad. Like, listen to this. I mean, it's kind of intentional in showing that you don't really know how to play the harp, but it's kind of funny, but I still have to pick it as the worst one here. A Link Between Worlds is basically a Link to the Past with more freedom added. You have the wall merging, the open progression, being able to tackle dungeons in whatever order you want. I actually think it's better than its predecessor, but you can't go wrong with either one, and you also can't go wrong with either game's OST. It leans very hard into the A Link to the Past soundtrack with updated arrangements, and most of them sound great here. There's one track that's specifically this game's own, and it's my favorite. Ravio's Return, Hilda's Sorrow. It's very slow and grand and sounds more like a film score than a video game track. It's like there's this thread of hope in it pushing against the low strings underneath it, and it just gets me every time. I've said this a few times throughout the video, but I think this is one of the most overlooked tracks in any Zelda game. And the worst here, I hate to pick a repeat, but it is Fortune Teller theme. I really try to avoid picking the same song twice, but it just is not good. I do not like this, and I could not find another easy pick here. The gameplay in Triforce Heroes is divisive, and I get it. I do have nostalgia for it from playing with friends when I got it on launch day, so I think that probably makes me a little less critical to it, even though I still don't love it. But something I don't even think is nostalgia-based is that the soundtrack is amazing here. Like, I think this is probably a top 10 Zelda soundtrack, and people just don't even realize it. It has a lot of accordion sounds. I think that makes for something really cool and different in the Zelda series. My favorite here going off of that is the staff credits theme. It feels like it took all the highlights of the whole soundtrack and compressed them into one place. All that string and accordion energy together. The main theme also has this funky time signature that would give me a headache to try and learn, but listening to it is great. So I was looking forward to talking about the worst here because I think this is the worst song in the entire Zelda franchise. You probably know what I'm talking about if you played this game. It is the Convicted Princess. It's the opening cutscene track explaining the curse on Princess Styla. The music is basically one note with some light percussion on top. There's literally a door slam in there for dramatic effect. I understand what this is going for, and maybe you should say I shouldn't even count this, but I'm counting it anyway. Like, who went from this to this? Breath of the Wild did something very different with its music. It of course has a quieter, more ambient piano tone, designed to blend into the world rather than lead you through it. The second you leave the Great Plateau, you start hearing the great ambient music here, which is kind of controversial I've been seeing, but I actually did like what they were going for. And real quick, the story trailer theme for this game literally might be a top 5 Zelda song of all time, but Nintendo has never put it in an actual game as far as I know. And I just don't understand how they make such a banger and then just literally never use it. But anyway, for tracks that are actually in the game, Revali's theme is my pick. This light woodwinds, elegant melody, fits the character perfectly. I also really like Calamity Ganon's theme. Kind of has like some Indiana Jones vibes to it. I also really like Rito Village too. The champion themes are the highlights of the soundtrack, and Revali's is the one I keep going back to. The worst for me is Shrine Guardian battle theme. So when you get into those combat trial shrines and a Guardian Scout pops up to fight you, this music kicks in with its percussion, the weird piano sounds, and if you're anything like me on your first playthrough, you struggled with those tests of strength, and you had to hear this track loop over and over again while you figure out how to parry the attacks, and it just goes from tense to grating faster than almost any track I can think of. A lot of Breath of the Wild's ambient music is still beautiful even when it does almost nothing. This one is not. Tears of the Kingdom had an impossible task. It had to follow Breath of the Wild without just being Breath of the Wild again. And for a lot of people, it is just Breath of the Wild again, but I think there's a lot here. Of course, the 3 full layers of Hyrule stacked on top of each other, the Ultra Hand literally letting you do anything, better dungeons here, and the soundtrack is also the biggest in the Zelda series. I'm gonna go with the song that has a few different names depending on what video you're watching. Final Catch, The Last Catch, Reaching for Her Hand, The Final Fall. I really love the orchestral feel of it. I love how Zelda's lullaby is woven in and the classic Zelda theme underneath it. It is one of my favorite themes in the entire series. Honorable mentions for Yunobo's theme, Riju's theme, and Kogera's battle. Because I think in some other games these would be the best, but my favorite here is just amazing. For the worst, I want to be fair here because this is a massive soundtrack and the floor is high. Not every piece of music is going to be a hit, and Stable is my least favorite. I get the vibe where it's just laid back and just fits going to the stable, but that high-pitched flute just gets to me, and because you stop at stables constantly, you just end up hearing it constantly. And somewhere around hour 40 of this game, I just started riding right past the stables just to avoid hearing that. Now, I want to be clear that Cold Temperature is worse than this, in my opinion, but that I would say is just ambient noise. And finally, we arrive at Echoes of Wisdom. So this game is not even 2 years old now, and I think it takes some time for Zelda music to really get recognition, because it'll get that initial boost, and then it takes time for something to become a classic. I think Echoes of Wisdom has a pretty strong soundtrack. I've heard it be called underwhelming, but I think it's pretty good. My favorite here is actually one that I was completely shocked when I heard, and it is Sudorn Village. It's one of my favorite village themes in the whole series. It has this woodwind sound throughout it that's just really beautiful. The clarinet especially just has this beautiful quality that just makes you feel bliss. I haven't really seen too many discussions about the music of this game, but Sudorn Village alone is enough to bring it into that conversation. My least favorite here is the Stamp Guy. It's going for that goofy and chaotic tone, but it just does not sound good. The sound design feels random. It's like they put a bunch of sounds into a hat and a bunch of sound effects and just took them out and decided what to use. I can honestly see why someone would love this just for the novelty of it, but not for me. And that is my favorite and least favorite music track in every mainline Legend of Zelda game. Remember that if you didn't agree with a single pick here, feel free to dislike if you want, but if you did agree, you gotta subscribe. Now go check out some of my other music videos and other series, join my Discord, and I'll see you next time.